everyone. Thank you so much for joining us for today's Lunch and Learn. What does it take to change a community? Next slide. We are joined today by Nancy Williams of the Waterville Community Land Trust. WCLT's Milliken Project focuses on revitalizing a 20-home neighborhood in Waterville by renovating homes, developing parks and community gardens, protecting the neighborhood's historic character, and working to help residents green their homes. Next slide. My name is Kathleen Neal. I'm the Director of Policy and Partnerships at Maine Conservation Voters and Maine Conservation Alliance. Our organizations work to protect Maine's environment and our democracy by building diverse coalitions, influencing public policy, holding politicians accountable, and winning elections. Next slide. A few technical notes for today's event. You are all muted, but we do want to hear from you. You can send questions to me, Kathleen, through the chat whenever they occur to you. And you can find that chat by hovering your mouse over the bottom of your screen. I'll keep track of the questions to ask during the Q&A at the end. If you have any technical difficulties today, please message Will Sedlak through the chat function for help. We are recording this event and the video will be posted later this afternoon on our website, where you can also find recordings of all our previous Lunch and Learns. Thank you again for joining us. And Nancy, I will turn it over to you.
All right. Let me know when people can see my screen. Is my screen visible?
Not quite yet, Nancy.
Oh, okay. Are you doing it, or do I need to do the screen?
You'll need to start the. You'll need to hit share screen in the bottom.
I'll need to do it. Okay. All right. One participant can share at a time. That's what I'm looking at here.
Give me a second, Nancy.
Nancy, if you just click on where it says share
I've got
screen.
it. Yeah, I think
Okay,
I've got it.
There you go.
Okay, all right. Well, welcome and thank you, Will and Kathleen, for this opportunity to speak to your forum on what does it take to change a community. I am going to start off by just saying I am no expert on the subject, but like a lot of you, I'm sure that you're curious and you are working in your own communities to make a difference and would like to know what someone else is doing. So that's why I'm here. Just a little bit of introduction. This is the Maine Conservation Voters, and I am actually retired from running conservation, both commissions and also land trusts. The last land trust I ran was actually here in Maine, just as part-time after I retired, the Somerset Woods trustees. And then before that, I worked for over 10 years in New York, running the Lake George Land Conservancy. And then before that, I was a land acquisition person for the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. So I share your passion and your interest in land. When I landed in Waterville, I felt that there were different challenges here that I was curious to know if I could possibly have any impact whatsoever. And because I had spent a few years in Vermont, particularly Burlington, I realized that there was an interesting model of a different type of land trust, and that was a community land trust. The Burlington Community Land Trust, which has a different name now, but it owns over 500 homes and something like 5,000 total units. So it's the largest community land trust in the country, but it's a very successful land trust. And I thought, well, you know, why not? We'll do something here. So found a few like-minded people and we started in 2013. Later in the slides, I will show you different types of community land trusts, but just briefly, for your thinking about this, depending on where you're from, there are farming community land trusts that deal with protecting land and also homes for farmers so they can afford to continue to farm. There are urban land trusts, both large and small communities. Here in In Maine, Portland has begun their own community land trust. And so their example of large and a small city would be like Waterville. They're both wealthy and poor communities. Wealthy communities are more traditionally the area where community land trusts begin their work because rents are really high and buying a house is very expensive. Poor communities, we have a whole different set of issues to deal with. Houses may be inexpensive to purchase, but may require a lot of money in order to repair, and neighborhoods are not that attractive, and it's very hard to get credit. There are also commercial nonprofits that also own commercial property for other nonprofits. And that's something that I think would be a lot of fun to get into. When you first start a community land trust, you'll find there's a bit of resistance, particularly from banks. And that takes a little bit of nurturing, but thanks to an accumulation of work, there's now a Maine Community Land Trust network, and we're working together to break down some of those barriers. And we're very fortunate to have a national community land trust, Grounded Solutions, and they do a very good job and are growing every day and helping us solve some of the issues that we run into. So I'll go into a little bit about Waterville Community Land Trust, and then we'll talk about how to impact communities. And I hope that you'll have more ideas than I do because I could use your help. There are about 260 or so community land trusts in the country, and you can see that they're pretty much all around the nation. They're also internationally oriented community land trusts, so we're not alone. You can see that a lot of us are in the Northeast area and of course on the West Coast. The reason we came about is because when properties increase in value, they often become unaffordable to many groups of populations. And you probably are aware that the lack of affordability often occurs because of the land. It's not usually the structure that increases in value nearly as much as the land increases in value. After all, land becomes scarce. Houses need work, they need constant updating. So market prices increase mainly because communities grow, they become, there's less land available, and so prices go up. Community land trusts take care of that problem by basically owning the land. We never sell the land, we lease it for 99 years to each house that's sold. We also keep an option on it, and we maintain the affordability throughout time. So that lower line where the yellow is, it remains an affordable price throughout time, even though the market price is escalating dramatically, again, mostly because of land value increases. How do we work? Well, we work like all of you do if you're in conservation land trust. You rely on public donations, foundations, and other types of subsidies, such as purchasing land from forest and lands, for example, or getting money from them, or your communities. You form a CLT and you acquire homes in your particular focus area. And again, I just repeat that the difference is when we sell our homes, we keep the land, we lease it, and therefore we're able to control the resale value. That's important, particularly when you have a community that is improving, that is experiencing what is generally called in a negative connotation, gentrification. If you have that, you want to retain the affordability throughout time. We are governed by the community. Typically, we have 1/3 of our board members are residents of the area we're working in. They are people who would qualify to purchase our homes, even if they are not residents of our homes. And that's usually people with incomes of 80% or less of the area median income. And then we have other people who are interested in community land trust and protecting neighborhoods. And we also have often people who are considered experts, professionals, maybe they're city planners and that sort of thing. And they're bankers. That would be lovely to have on a board. So again, separation of home and land is what creates the perpetual affordability of a community land trust. Here in Waterville, we're very fortunate to have Colby College, and we often ask the students and the professors to do studies for us. And this study was done just to show that when you have poorly maintained properties in a community, it impacts dramatically the community, the properties around them, which made us realize that one of the things we needed to do was to own homes, improve them, resell them, and continue that process until we had a positive impact so that people had security, that they knew that, you know, the house next to them was not going to turn into a real mess, and that it was worth their while either purchasing the house or investing further in the house. The other thing about Waterville in particular is that we are a very high rental city. We have something like, at least across the whole city, we have about 53% landlord-owned homes, but in many neighborhoods it's far higher. It's 75 to 85% non-owner occupied homes. This isn't always a problem, but it can be a problem. And in Waterville, in certain areas, it is a problem. We also found, of course, that crime follows neighborhoods that are living under distress, and I'm sure that's no surprise to anyone. The other interesting thing about community land trust houses is that we are able to hold on to our homes. Our homeowners are able to retain their home ownership even during very severe foreclosure years. Serious delinquencies occur far more in market rate houses than they occur in community land trust houses. Of course, that's partly because we very carefully choose our residents, our buyers, but it's also because we work with them, we maintain relationships with them, and we know when they may be having troubles, and we're here to help. We are a community, after all. This is an example of, this is our first house. And it was a house that we purchased in a very fortuitous way. A woman really wanted to move out of her home into a much smaller place, and we were able to purchase it at a reasonable price. It needed a lot of work. I'd say we probably put about $75,000 in the house, and we did not sell it for $75,000. We sold it for less than that because this area of Waterville does not command high prices. But we also do things like have little community fairs. We have a garden. We work with the South End Neighborhood Association and the Quality of Life Committee here in Waterville. And they have this wonderful garden at the end of a street that they are having great success doing. And we also have a community park. On the bottom right hand, you see the beginnings of our garden park and our fence that we put up this year in the center area there. The important thing is to know your community, to know what your community needs. Is it a community, as Waterville is, an old mill town that lost jobs? That the last mill closed, I think, sometime in the 80s. And beginning in the 1970s, mills were closing. And before that, and people started moving out. Home ownership became less and less obvious. And the community began to show great distress. These are pictures of the area that we're working in right now in the old South End. Most of these places are gone. They are no longer there, but it gives you a feeling of the community that was there when the mills were still open and people had good jobs and were able to afford more than just the very basics. This is a house that was torn down about 5 years ago. And it sort of depicts what happens in a long-term situation where there's not enough investment in a community, and there really isn't, frankly, a strong code observance to protect the neighborhood from this type of decline. Clearly, if you have a home next to this sort of place, you're going to have problems in selling your house, and you will stop probably investing in it yourself, and therefore the decline in the neighborhood. But this particular neighborhood we're working in is absolutely charming. It has a great sense of place. It has a great history of hardworking people. Most of these people were French Canadians that came down from the Quebec region starting in the 1830s. And some of these houses were built by them. Some of them were built by Yankee entrepreneurs. The church you see in the background is the church from Empire Falls. If you haven't seen that movie, you can watch it being painted in that movie. Here's another street scene. You see it has a real rhythm to it. Many of the houses had front porches so that people could enjoy sitting outside and chatting with their neighbors. It has a real sense of place. It really deserves to be protected and improved. So this was our first house when we purchased it, although the picture on the left is actually, it's pre-vinyl siding, but it gives you a sense of the style of the house. And I have to say, after having worked on this house and the next house, I find that these houses are very well built. They've got good bones, as we say in the building business, and they are well worth preserving. As we started to work on it, it became more and more attractive. And we're always very pleased to show off our little half bathroom that we get upstairs by some manner. Every house we do will probably end up finding a place to put a bathroom upstairs, at least a half bathroom. And this was our first home buyer. This is a little piece of history. In the basement of the house, there are these big water containers, big concrete vats. And the guy who lived there for many years had a fish business. And you can see the old sign of $1.40 per dozen for shiners. And we kept it there because frankly, it was going to be very hard to take out. But also it was a piece of history and it seemed to us it could be useful to store items to the new homeowner. And we're very pleased that our new homeowner found it very interesting and a lot of fun. The park that I mentioned to you before, which is on the Kennebec River, this is the master plan for the park. We're hoping to have a really lovely flower garden, which has been started last year, and also perhaps some beds for community garden if that appears to be needed. We've also added a fruit garden, and we have apple trees going up and other types of fruit trees, particularly cherries, tart cherries. It views the river, and below is land that has a good bit of wetland on it because the water from the hill above is flowing down into this land, and it's quite damp. But there is an area that was an old farm area that we would very much like to bring back as a farming area, and we'd like to have a greenhouse down there someday and have a farm run by local people. Perhaps the CSA would be really fun. So that gets us into the Millikan Neighborhood. This is a neighborhood that was started to be built in 1875. The blue line depicts pretty much the full neighborhood. It was done by the Milliken family. And they sold both land and also land with houses on it. And the area that we are calling our Milliken Project is the area within the red line area. And that has about 20 houses. And the reason why we did that was because we realized that we could work in the whole city and not really have an impact on any particular neighborhood unless we really focus on one neighborhood. And we started out in just the South End, and now we've become even more defined and limited it even to a smaller area of just one community. The average assessment in this particular neighborhood is only $30,000. That's pretty low in the scheme of things for Waterville. And so we've got a long way to go up. This is a picture of the property here. This was the house that we ended up buying before the other houses were built. The street was originally called Messier Street, but now it's called Moore Street. And this is our house that we're currently working on. It's changed quite a bit. There it is when we purchased it. I'd say it had every handyman in the world working on it, but relatively low level of handiness. We've had to tear off some bad sections and rebuild others. These are some interior shots. We've had to gut the house even further than that to get to it. We did rebuild the porch, which we're very proud of, because the porch is the heart of this house. It's a place where people can enjoy a little bit of private setting for a morning coffee. And I think it was really nice to see that porch reappear. This is the neighborhood. And again, it's built with the same good bone houses, lots of good stuff here to work on. There are people who live differently than some of us, but you know, we're eager to get to know everyone, and COVID has not been very helpful in getting to know our neighbors. We hope that will change soon. Again, nice houses. Again, just neighbor issues, people who are not living there anymore and trash gets left out in front of their properties. There are some vacant houses in this area, and anything that's vacant tends to get abused. There are houses that really need severe work. This house is behind our current project, and he doesn't have clapboards on a good chunk of the house. And we're really hoping that we can help out there somehow. So, you know, what does it take? We did win recently the U.S. Mayor's Conference second place winner for the Community Wins grant. And we won it by trying to develop a project to work on this neighborhood with the neighbors. And what we realized, and this is a very shallow realization yet, without a lot of work behind it yet, but what does it take to change a neighborhood? Well, it takes, first of all, investment in a neighborhood. We have to improve the quality of life of and the housing stock in the neighborhood. We need to also help the economy. It doesn't do any good to fix up all the houses without having people able to take care of them. And so we need to figure out how can we do that. And we've decided that helping the teenagers and seniors, perhaps by having them work with us to develop a agricultural business of a CSA might be an interesting way to start that process of working together and forming a business that would be productive for everyone and help people make a little bit of income, and also get people to get to know each other, which is community engagement. How do you get people to work together? I suspect that everyone there knows each other well and they work well together, and we're the newcomers. So we need to figure out how we can connect with them. I just want to talk a little bit now about other Maine CLTs. There are about 10 or a dozen of us in Maine. We were not well known to each other. In fact, when we had our first meeting together, we were shocked that there were so many of us. One of them is the Island Housing Trust, and they were started in 1989, and they own at least 33 homes. They may own more now, but they form a very important addition to a island community, which, as you probably all know, is very expensive to own a home on. There's also Covenant Community Land Trust, and this is an example of one of their homes. They were started in 1978. They owned at least 200 acres and at least 26 homes right now. And when I say own, understand what I typically mean is that they have sold the house and they own the lease on the land with a 99-year lease. This is their woodshed. This is one of these projects that they're working on in order to provide wood, and I think it's Sedgwick, for their local people so that they always have wood for their wood stoves. The Greater Portland Community Land Trust, this is a project that they are working on. It's on their books, and they're working with the city to hopefully have this happen. And I think this is a particularly exciting project because it's the first larger scale condominium type CLT that would be built in Maine, and much needed, as you all know, in Portland. There's another type of community land trust, Raise Op, which is in the Lewiston area, and that's a housing cooperative. Another great idea that community land trusts are able to do. We do condos and co-ops, and also rentals and home ownership. Land in Common is an example of a farming community land trust, and this is one of their farmhouses here and on their land, and this is in Green, Maine. And what they do apparently is they allow people to use their land for food grown for distribution to food markets. So that's the end of my slideshow. If anyone, I hope you have questions, because I'm sure I have not answered enough of the information that might be available. Thank you.
Nancy, thank you so much. It is really fascinating to hear about all the ways that community land trusts play a role in building community health and wealth and resilience. And I think a lot of this is new to me, so thank you. I suspect it may be new to some of our legislators as well. So we ask that all of you who are learning along with us stay tuned for opportunities to support community land trusts and let your legislators know how powerful this model can be as they're making decisions that may affect the future for our community land trusts. Now let's ask some questions. Nancy, just a couple of getting the structure clear in our heads. What's the difference between a community land trust and a community development corporation?
Community land trusts are community developers.
There you go.
Yes. Yes.
Thank you.
You have to qualify to be such, but we are pretty much by definition community developers, mostly based on the fact that we have a board which represents the community by that 1/3, 1/3, 1/3 that I showed earlier, and also that we build affordable homes.
And some questions about the relationship between the CLT and the homeowner. What happens to the land lease if the land trust ceases to exist? What happens to the homeowner? Is that all in the contract somewhere?
It is in the leasehold. It's the same as conservation land trust. If a conservation land trust goes out of business, then their assets are usually transferred to a similar organization. And that brings up the one reason why it's so important for the community land trust to develop a network of community land trust in Maine, because where would a property in Waterville go if we went out of business? Now, we're also contacting and working with the state, Maine Housing Authority, and we're going to be addressing this question with them in a matter of a couple of months to talk about what would be the best legal way to handle that situation. So we certainly are aware of that as an issue. Of the 260 some odd community land trusts across the country, that's an issue that they also have worked on in the same way that we have.
And obviously our first choice is that community land trusts like yours continue to thrive and be able to do this work for a long, long time.
Yeah.
Do you have any relationship with Habitat for Humanity? It seems like there's some similarities, but also some important differences. So.
Yeah, we do. Actually, we have Habitat for Humanity is one of the partners with the Milliken Project, along with the South End Neighborhood Association. The difference between community land trust and Habitat for Humanity is that Habitat, of course, uses sweat equity. We could, but we don't right now. And that after about 5 to 10 years or so, Habitat homes usually are back on the free market. So they're no longer affordable homes, depending on what sort of relationship the Habitat had with their buyers. They could use a covenant and retain affordability throughout time, throughout sales, but typically they don't, because the idea behind Habitat, and I hope I'm not misspeaking, but the idea behind Habitat is to help at least that one family improve their economic condition, while a community land trust is more focused on continually helping other families. So every time a house sells, it remains affordable to the next person as well. The people selling their community land trusts are able to make about 25 to 50% of the appreciated value. Of course, they get their own equity back, just as we do when we sell our homes, right? There's nothing different about that. But appreciation is determined by an appraisal, and we share that appreciation. The other 50 to 75% of the appreciated value goes back into producing more affordable homes or protecting the ones that we have. But there are plenty of opportunities for Habitat and community land trusts to work together, and we expect to do that. And there are many models actually across the country that we can follow.
That is really helpful. Thank you, Nancy, and answers one of the other questions that I was going to ask, which was about how homeowners are building that equity if you own the land. But that makes a lot of sense that you're sort of sharing that appreciation over time.
Right.
Who pays the property taxes on a CLT home?
The homeowner.
The homeowner does. Okay.
Yeah.
And you did mention that there are some different models. It sounds like this is a structure that can be adapted to different communities. So in Waterville, it's single family homes, but in Portland, it's multifamilies or condos, duplexes. There's no limit, it sounds like.
It's whatever your community needs. I mean, I'm aware of one community land trust that started off by buying the local theater. There was one theater in town, everyone loved it, and it was going out of business. So they made it a nonprofit theater. Another one started by starting a small grocery store, which was a nonprofit grocery store because there was no place to shop in the community. So that, whatever your community needs is what you want to start with. Certainly, single family homes is what Waterville has started with, but that doesn't mean that we won't eventually get into good rental, because there's a great need for good quality rental as well. And certainly there are, I think that it will be interesting to do things like co-ops. We're very interested in looking at that, because we have a lot of houses which are very large and are too large. You can't conceive of an affordable home being so large that you can't afford to paint it or maintain it. So I'm sure that some of these larger houses, once we get involved with those, will become either condos or other types of ownership.
And with so much variation, which is really an incredible, that flexibility is really important to meet community needs. But with that variation, is there a governing body or set of rules that all community land trusts have to follow, or can it look really different in each community?
Well, we have a common land lease. We have a model lease that we use. So that draws us into the same legal framework. And as far as I know, almost all of us have the same structure of an organization. We don't have what conservation land trusts have, and that is that we don't have the standards that were developed mostly because of tax purposes, tax problems that people experience with gifts of conservation easements. And that was developed in order to protect both the good owners of conservation easements and also the community land trust and the property owners who gave donated those easements. So community land trusts do not have that, and I suspect that we will, although we don't have the same thing. We're not getting gifts of land typically to set aside and not develop. So I don't know that we will ever need the same thing that the conservation community needed. Yeah.
That makes sense. There are a lot of folks on the call today who love what they're hearing and are wondering how to duplicate this model in their own communities. So a couple of questions. Is there a resource hub for folks who are thinking about community land trusts? Should we just ask you? How do you get started? And do you have any advice for communicating this sort of the potential of this model to potentially a skeptical public or skeptical city council?
Yes, all of the above. All of the above and more will you
Okay.
find. If you seek this, you will find those those issues. Some community land trusts have been started by their cities or towns. And they are probably the lucky ones because they don't have to overcome, the whole issue of change. So that being said, there is something called Grounded Solutions. And you can look that up online and you can find a lot of information. You don't even have to be a member of Grounded Solutions to look at their resource base. So you can find a lot of information there. The resistance you will find when you first sell your first house, you will find many people do not like the idea that they don't own the land. I understand that, but you don't own the land if you own a condo either. And Maine has a long history of hunting camps not on land that you own, on paper company land. So it's not a different concept. The only thing that feels different is that it's the single family house. But there are single family camps on large pieces of land of associations, and you also don't own that land. So it's not that unusual. Then the second thing you will have to overcome is just the whole idea of a community land trust that has people working in the community for the community. People will wonder, well, why do we need this, and those sort of questions. And so that depends on your community. Some communities are actively interested in making sure that their neighborhoods are really nice for everyone. And other communities, particularly poorer communities, probably don't have that same desire or ability. I mean, there are a lot of poor communities that don't have that ability. The thing that really I think community land trusts bring to Maine and other states is that we are just like conservation land trusts in that we bring in dollars to a community. We pay taxes, by the way, in all of our property, we pay taxes. Our homeowners pay taxes. So we're tax-paying citizens, right? And so that's helpful. But the resistance with the banks is another problem. Banks have to get accustomed to the idea of community land trust 99-year leaseholds. And I'm proud to say that I think here in Maine, there are a few banks that are quite willing to help out. Norway Savings Bank is a good one. Skowhegan Savings Bank is another good one. Many good banks are beginning to appreciate what community land trusts do, because let's face it, they're in the business of providing mortgages to people. And if properties improve, the mortgages improve. There are fewer foreclosures, fewer neighborhood problems, lower crime, right? So community land trusts are really good for communities and banks.
That's really helpful, Nancy. And the website you mentioned, was it Grounded?
Grounded, like
Grounded?
ground
Okay.
lease. Yeah, Grounded
Okay.
Solutions.
Grounded Solutions. All right. And we will get that into the chat for everybody so you can see what it looks like. Where do we want to go? Oh, and also thank you. We've got a loyal Lunch and Learn listener who pointed out that you can always share the recording of this program with your community if you're looking to build some momentum around community land trusts. Another question about the homeowners: how do you find the folks who end up purchasing their homes through a community land trust?
Well, this is a place where people might want to look at our particular website because we, like all community land trusts that are selling their homes to people in their local communities, establish a priority of interest. You know, who are we trying to sell our house to? We are private sellers. So as long as we don't violate any laws, we can sell to whomever we want. So first of all, you have to have an income of 80% or less of the area median income. And after that, there are other criteria that we clearly list out in the open on our website. And it's like a checklist, you know. For example, in our first house that we sold, there were a lot of single parents who applied. And those are the people we really want to help. You know, they're working families. All, you know, and you have to get a mortgage, right? So you probably are working, but you're not making enough, or there's one income, or there's a disability involved, or there's a very high personal expense in the house, like a medical expense. These single family people had children, many of them adult children with issues. So those were the people who applied in great numbers. And we're very, very glad to see that. And under that, we have a checklist of, you know, what things are we looking for in our buyers. So you can find that on our website and tailor it to your own community, what's important to your community. I have to say the primary issues that people have that could not qualify to buy our house, and there were lots of them, are people who had poor credit. You have to get a mortgage, which means you have to have decent credit that a bank will accept. Now, we are now working, and we're very happy to say, and we're very grateful to say, that the Maine Housing Authority is beginning to show real signs that they will be working with our banks to provide mortgages, which means that our buyers would be able to get the sort of assistance that Maine Housing Authority offers to first-time home buyers. And first-time home buyers, by the way, means that you haven't owned a home for the last 3 years. It doesn't always have to mean it's your first house, all right? So that's, you know, I mean, I think that when we run into people who have poor credit, we send them to our local KV-CAP. Also CEI, you know, there are many places that offer homeowner courses to help you figure out and counseling on how to improve your credit rating, and also how to own a home. And when we grow, one of our aspirations is to also offer a course on how to maintain your house, so that whenever you have a dripping faucet, something relatively simple, you don't have to call for expensive help. You can fix it yourself, or that's what community land trusts are for. Give us a call and we'll see if we can't send somebody over to look at it with you and maybe fix it, if it's simple.
That responsibility for the maintenance is almost as overwhelming sometimes as the financial burden of owning a home. And so that goes a long way. We mentioned in our teaser about this program that that the Waterville Community Land Trust also helps folks green their homes. What does that look like?
Well, that's an aspiration, because we have a lot of these old houses. Fortunately, I'm finding that many of them have had insulation blown in. So they're not cold, but they are not efficient. They have, you know, old boilers, and they need to be replaced with heat pumps. And so that's something that we are working on now, is to try to figure out, as a group, could we have a buying block for heat pumps? Could we work through Efficiency Maine to get heat pumps at reduced prices for our homes and our homeowners, so that we can do that? We've also looked at solar, maybe perhaps a small solar farm that would help, but you know, they have to be pretty large. I'm beginning to understand solar farms a little bit. They've got to be fairly large to affect a whole neighborhood. So I'm not sure where we're going to get from there, but there are plenty of community land trusts, more mature than we are, who build greenhouses if they're building new. And they put solar panels on the roof, and they build to very high standards. And certainly, if we were building new, we would too.
So fantastic, because of course, that's a huge part of the perpetual affordability, right? Is knowing that you've been able to control the utility costs,
Absolutely.
the maintenance costs. So that's fantastic. Nancy, you're doing so much incredible work. Why aren't there community land trusts everywhere in Maine? Why are there so few right now?
I think because Maine suffered the same sort of devastation that much of the Northeast did when, and the Midwest, when we lost jobs. We lost good paying mill jobs, for example. And so it became more possible for people to rent. I mean, people rent often, sometimes one reason is because they need to change jobs, and owning a home means that it's not so easy to get up and move. It's very expensive to move. So I think that's part of the reason that Maine in particular, I've found to be a state with a lot of high rental, although across the state, it's not, if you look at the state, but that includes the coastal area, which I'm sure is far less rental than interior Maine is. But I think it's like anything, it takes time to develop a new program. And there are quite a few of them on the islands along Maine, and that's because islands are, of course, expensive to live on, and they're very expensive to buy because they're favorite places for other people to own second homes. And so the Community Land Trust really started getting a hold there, but because they were on the islands, they were away from everyone else, I guess, and were able to do their own fundraising because they did have fairly wealthy people to help them out. Now that we're beginning to move interior Maine, it's a little more complicated. And we do need more community land trusts in order to be successful. And I really encourage everyone who's interested to reach out to, you can reach out to me, you can look at Grounded Solutions, and because we really want to grow the community land trust community here in Maine.
That's fantastic, and we've got some folks who have clearly pulled up the Waterville Community Land Trust website while we're even on this program, and noticed that financial donations are always welcome, but that you're also looking for volunteers. What kind of skills or tasks would be helpful?
Well, let's see. Yesterday I was plastering. The day before that, or a week before that, I was tearing out walls. Any of that, just labor is really important. We don't expect people, obviously we have to hire professional plumbers and electricians because these houses are not ours, they're going to be sold to someone else, so they have to be code enforced. But pure labor and construction, I mean, some of us are also carpenters, and that's always needed, finish work, those sort of things. We need all the volunteers we can get. And Habitat does too. I know we're all suffering from too few volunteers.
And you mentioned too the playground and the community gardens. It's a different kind of labor, but I'm guessing you'd welcome that sort of landscape support as well.
Anyone who loves to garden, who loves flowers and shrubs like I do, or likes to cut grass, that's really cool. And in fact, we had a director who lived right across the street from our park. He just moved there a year and a half ago, and he loved to cut grass, and now he's moving. So yeah, anything like that is much needed. And we're really hoping to develop a business with agriculture. In the city of Chicago, which was the inspiration, they have done that. You know, they have a team-run community garden and a farm stand, CSA type thing. And we just see that as a way for the teens and seniors in particular to get together and grow a fantastic little business on our land on the river.
It's just incredible. I know in our call to action, we asked folks to stay tuned for places where legislative advocacy may be helpful. Are there any specific issues that are coming up right now, or things that we could make come up so that we can build some more support and make your job easier?
Well, I think we're in the process of trying to define that. We are working with Maine Housing, and we do have some of our legislators who are helping out in that endeavor. But there are so few legislators who are aware of community land trusts that just asking them, gee, do you know about these community land trusts? When we are knocking at their doors, they will say, oh yeah, one of my constituents asked me about that community land trust. I think I've heard that word before. So yeah, that in itself would be very helpful. There is also, I know there is some legislation on the books for land banking, which would be great for communities to bank land and hold it for future housing. And there are probably other initiatives that will come forward, but you know, there are thousands of bills in the legislature right now. So I'm not sure it would be helpful to add one at the moment, but we certainly have our eyes on that in the future. Yeah, thank you for asking that.
Definitely. And tell us, how do you see, you've said a little bit about Waterville Community Land Trust's future and what you'd like to see. What about community land trusts in general? What's the future look like for CLTs in Maine?
I think it looks really good. I mean, in these days of a great justifiable concern that we don't have an equal economy across all economic levels, that people need a helping hand. And to me, that's the most appealing thing about community land trust, is that we're not just giving things to people. We're asking people to take care of themselves. We're, as you say, we're giving them a hand up, but we're not just giving things away. And we're asking for them to work with us to make a better community. That's what I'm hoping will happen across Maine, is people working together to make their community how they want it to become.
So inspiring. I'm so glad that you were able to join us today, Nancy, and tell us all more about this. We have gotten just a flurry of messages from folks who are grateful for learning more about this and eager to keep learning. And I think we're together going to do quite a bit to advance community land trusts. So let's keep it up. Thanks to all of you for joining and for your great questions and comments. Next week, we're going to go, we've been at the very local level today. Next week, we're going to zoom right up to the federal level. It is hard to believe that we are just over a week into the new Biden-Harris administration because so much has already happened. But we'll be joined by Sarah Chifo, who is the Vice President for Government Affairs for the League of Conservation Voters. And she's going to give us a rundown on what has already happened on climate action at the federal level and what we expect to see and hope to see in the administration's first 100 days. So I hope you will all join us. Later this afternoon, you will get an email with a link to this program, the recording, and a little bit more detail. I really hope that we can build some community around community land trusts and keep this fabulous work going. Thank you, Nancy. Thanks to all of you. Have a wonderful weekend.